there is something going on that we need to discuss from a U.S. soccer perspective, because Tyler Adams, who was suspended for Leeds' game against Manchester City yesterday, went on the pregame show with our friend Tim Howard and just casually mentioned how excited he was for the U.S. to play in the 2024 Copa America. And all of us were like, what? Mm-hmm. Because that hasn't really been confirmed. Now, we've heard rumors because it's supposed to be held in Ecuador, but that hasn't been confirmed by CONMEBOL, the Federation of South America. Then maybe Peru was interested as well. Maybe they're going to co-do it. But then the U.S. has said, hey, you know what? We're hosting 26, the World Cup. Why don't we just take Copa America off your hands as well? Canada and Mexico will get into the competition. So there's 10 teams in South America. If you add 6 more, you got a nice 4 groups of 4, and that's a pretty healthy tournament. That's pretty rad. Now, Canada, Mexico, U.S. would be in. There's talks of El Salvador, Panama, Guatemala, Costa Rica, which would be excellent for all these teams to be involved. And from our perspective, boys, we don't have World Cup qualifying because we're already going to be automatic hosts or automatically in and qualified for the 2026 World Cup. So we need as many meaningful games.
We need to be in this competition.
So Charlie, what are your thoughts about us in Copa America?
Love it. We all got a chance to be in it in 2007, and that was an eye-opening experience. So to see our A team play against the other A teams in CONMEBOL would be incredible. It's exactly what we need to be pushed against teams like Argentina and Brazil and Ecuador. I mean, Colombia, Paraguay, Peru, just incredible teams. I'm a big fan of us being in that tournament, and I'm glad that Tyler Adams spilled the beans. So let's go. And again, rest in peace to the great Pele. I mean, I don't think any of us would have played the game had it not been for his influence. So my condolences to the GOAT.
Oh, well, Charlie, we're going to send you on your way. Apparently you've got landlord duties. Some people aren't paying their rent for one of your 50. So we're going to send you on your way. I'm sure Play had a lot of great properties as well. Yes. He's got to collect money too. It's just part of the job.
It's a tough time of year for Charlie because of the holidays, he's got to collect rent from all the houses he owns from people living in them.
It's Q4, buddy.
People aren't necessarily home. And, like this is hopefully Charlie's going to just wipe the slate clean into the new year.
We got to get some tax implications before the end of the year. So you go do your thing, Charlie.
I've missed you guys. Hey, much love.
Charlie Davies, everybody. All right, Heath. So a question, though, that I think is interesting about Copa America. I know that it would be awesome for the U.S. to host it. We have the infrastructure to do it and be a nice precursor for the 26 World Cup. But I kind of like us playing outside of our country to maybe get a little bit tougher. You know what I mean? Where we have to go down to Ecuador. We have to go down to Peru. When we played in 2007, we had to go down to Venezuela, and it's just a completely different environment than it is playing at home. Now, that said, because we're hosting the 2026 World Cup, maybe we need as many home games as possible. I just want some tough games. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about Euro 2020 and that it was 11, or was at least supposed to be 11 countries that hosted games. Remember, I was all split up.
Right.
There was something about that I really liked because you were going to have a few really far away games, and like Denmark and the Christian Eriksen thing that happened in Parken Stadium, which is FC Copenhagen Stadium and Denmark's national stadium, right? There's something about, I like the idea of being able to have some games or a couple games in the US, but I'm always just curious about how big of a tournament could you do if you had it decentralized in the way that the Euros were and being able to play some games in different places. Like the thing about playing in a country like Peru or Ecuador or anywhere that's not the US, right? You're really playing neutral crowds a lot of the times. Now, if you got Argentina, you're going to play against the full stadium of Argentinians, right? You're going to play those types of away games. But if you had some other ones, it might not be as hostile of a territory, a hostile of an environment if it's a neutral stadium, even though there's traveling fans, if that makes sense. And so I wonder what the capabilities are. I mean, I take that far more than playing in the US, Jimmy, that's for sure. And I actually like Copa America more than qualifying because I think we're going to have the same pressures, knowing that this team now has a ton of pressure on them going to 2026 because I think we achieved what was expected for 22 and 26 will likely, I don't have any actual proof of this, but a different manager is going to have huge pressure to drive success on this team towards 2026, knowing that we don't have qualifying. I think not qualifying is a blessing because that's very different than what the World Cups are. So these types of competitions and then having an opportunity to play huge friendlies between now and then as well against big nations. I don't know. I really like it. I don't want it. I don't personally, out of convenience. Yes, I would love to be able to just drive right here to SoFi or up to Santa Clara again to see games. But at the same time, I also want to see this team challenged in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, same. I'm feeling the same way. I'm a little bit torn, but I just want us to be in the tournament. Let's just start there, because when I think about the 16 teams that could be in it, we could draw Brazil. We could get a Brazil, Chile, and Costa Rica group. Now, that is a hard-ass group, and that is a group that you have to, very similar to a World Cup, you have to manage. How are we going to get out of the group? And then there's always two tournaments, as they say, right? You have the group stage, and then you have, when this happens, you go right into the quarterfinals. And I know that when Copa America happened in 2016, we got to the semis, I think, and lost to Argentina. I was at that game, and they ran us over. It was 4-0, I think. Messi scored the most ridiculous free kick, and Brad Guzan, I think, is still wondering how that went in. And we got outclassed in that game. And that was a good moment for us to continue to grow, continue to look back and say, all right, this is where we need to be. We're not there yet. Very similar. There's some similarities to the Netherlands.
But it was a very, we're not as bad as we think we are, and we're not quite as good as we think we are, or we hope to be.
Yeah. And this is going to be another opportunity to do that. What I love about the Copa America is that there might be, if no disrespect to El Salvador or Guatemala, but those will be the teams that we see them a lot. I don't want us to play them. I think, though, when you have 4 groups of 4, you're going to have a very, very difficult group. All groups are going to be difficult, and I love that. And I think that cutting our teeth in that environment, I think, is going to be important, because as we talked about the expanded World Cup from 32 teams to 48, I think there's a natural, it's going to be a little bit easier to get through the group, and I don't think it's going to be. And so I want us to be able to try to manage the group stage and these types of group stages as much as possible.
Also, let's not forget that in those group stages, the U.S. beat Paraguay, right? Lost to Colombia. I'm looking at it here now.
Which one?
In Copa America 2016.
2016, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So in the group stages, beat Costa Rica, lost to Colombia, and beat Paraguay 1-0. Got to the quarterfinals, beat Ecuador. Got to the semifinals, got beat again, and then played Colombia again for the 3rd place match, and lost 1-0. By the way, the U.S. had red cards in 3 of the games in that tournament.
We were feisty.
Yeah, feisty. But I remember that being a thing when we went into that tournament. You think about Paraguay, Colombia, and you and I, we had Paraguay and Colombia in 2007, right? Wasn't it Paraguay, Colombia, and Argentina in our group?
I was at these games. Now that I was at all 3 of the, I was at every U.S. game. It's so funny that I need a refresher. But I was at
I think I was at 2 of the 3, maybe. But for the group stages. But when you think about it, the team actually was able to show how well we matched up, at least stylistically then, to be able to grind it out. And I remember that being a hugely prideful moment for me, because some of those stadiums felt like at times away games, as it does in the US, right? When you play against any of these countries, because believe it or not, Colombia will turn up in a lot of these cities around the US. Paraguay will show up in these places, because it's a rare opportunity for these fans that now live away to travel in and either travel to from Paraguay, or mostly be in the region and get a rare opportunity to see their national team play. And I remember the U.S. performing well on that one and leaving that very proud. And it's crazy to think how far into the future we are, heading into 2023 now, that I think it'll be a great test for us to see kind of where we're at against these teams, if and when we are part of this tournament.
No, I think we will. I don't think Tyler Adams is coming out of nowhere. I don't think he goes on television and lets that slip without having some pretty concrete evidence that we're going to be in the tournament. Now, for me, it's just a matter of whether it's going to be hosted in Ecuador / Peru, or if it's going to be hosted in the U.S.
Yeah.
I bet you it's the U.S. I think there's way too many dollar signs, and the infrastructure is probably a little bit more sound than some of those other countries in terms of just the scope, especially if you want to bring Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. into it, which I think there's a real big desire to make that happen. Now, here's a question for producer Des.
Yeah, I was about to ask you that same one.
Yeah. How privy are active U.S. men's national team players to these types of decisions? I would say that you probably are aware of conversations that are happening and that it's a possibility. And he then follows up, like, when did you guys find out about your Copa America participation? I heard about it in 2007. I remember Bob Bradley calling me and saying, this was in March of 2007, saying that we've just kind of finalized it. We're going to be playing in back-to-back tournaments over the summer, and I want you to play in both tournaments. And I was thrilled, of course, and it didn't work out the way that I wanted. I missed the first one due to injury, but the second one I did get to play with you, Heath.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first time I had heard of it, and it hadn't been announced yet. So probably, I don't know, maybe a month later it was announced. But yeah, I think I would assume Tyler, especially as the captain, knows a little bit more intel than maybe somebody who's like Joe Scally, who probably won't get the same type of info.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that information had been sort of trickling out for quite a while now. It just hadn't been validated by a player or a coach or a staff member. I mean, let's not forget that U.S. soccer has been very quiet since the World Cup ended. Like, there's not been, a discussion of coaching change from U.S. soccer.
Tab Ramos is out here taking shots.
A reflection of the World Cup, where we went right, where we went wrong. There hasn't been any of that. Not to mention the fact that the Soccer United marketing deal is up and U.S. Soccer is going in-house with a lot of their stuff. So they've got a lot to figure out right now, including the future of their U.S. Open Cup property and all those types of things. So there's a lot going on in their world. But yeah, I think certain players are privy to a lot more information, especially the leaders, because it comes to road mapping where we're going, kind of feeling like you're in the know and you're kind of on the inside going on as well. But yeah, I had the sort of same information as you did, Jimmy, around Copa America. And I remember that being a big deal because you had the Gold Cup and then you had a Copa America, which was a few of the A-team guys at the time, but primarily the next group came in and most of those Gold Cup guys left because they needed a break during the summer before going back into their club team environments. And so I remember there being a huge complaint against the U.S. for bringing less than best team to that tournament in terms of how they prioritize that. But obviously the Gold Cup had bigger implications. There's actually, to go back to that Gold Cup, I mean, that Copa America, Jimmy, David 83 says, what did we learn from it and change today with that way of playing then? And I think you said it just a few minutes ago, that bite and that fight, there's always been a collective spirit to the team, but there was a bit of a meanness in that group. And again, you go back and there was red cards in 3 of the games from the U.S. side, and that doesn't necessarily tell a whole story. But there was, with the addition of coming into the team with Michael Bradley coming into his prime, Jermaine Jones, these guys, there was a little bit of this like bite and meanness to playing ugly, playing scrappy, playing dirty, willing to not just be disciplined and fight. I think that's always been the American spirit of the game, but more so of like a little bit of that edge that you get in the South American countries, a little bit of that edge that you get in CONCACAF that I think the U.S. didn't always have that. We had that fight, right? That willingness to do what it takes to get the result, but a little bit of that like almost dirty play I think that the team had or embraced in that tournament, and that's sustained for a while. We look at our new team now, and there is a little bit of that. Tyler Adams is fully down. If you pull him out of the pocket and he's got to chase you down to the sideline, he will lay you out if he has to. And I think there's a lot of players now in our team, in our national team, that have that mentality, which I love.
Yeah, I'm looking at the roster now. I needed a refresher. We had Jossie Zardes up top, Bobby Wood, Wondolowski, Clint Dempsey were kind of our forwards. Midfielders were Beckerman, Bedoya, Jermaine Jones, Perry Kitchen. Didn't expect to see his name there. Darlington Nagbe, Christian Pulisic, and Graham Zusi. Defenders Beasler, Birnbaum, John Brooks, Jeff Cameron, Timmy Chandler, Fabian Johnson, Michael Orozco, DeAndre Yedlin, and then in goal, Guzan, Howard, and Horvath. It's interesting for me how many of those guys, not necessarily on the team, some of them were older. They were, of course, going to move on, but only Yedlin and Horvath and Pulisic. That's it. And I think, to your point, what did we learn from that? I think in some moments, or anytime you put yourself in a competition like that, you bring in players that you've trusted for many years that have performed for you already at a high level. That's going to be the backbone of your team, the core. And then you're going to have these other players. Pulisic, obviously, still very young. You're going to bring him in, see what he's about, and see how he gets ingrained within the group. And then you have the other players, the Wondolowskis, the Bobby Woods, the Zardeses. Can they now, with a meaningful competition, kick on to be the player that we hope that they're going to become? And some of them, it's a sink or swim time. And that's why these competitions are important, because we probably learned, I don't think Perry Kitchen ever got called in again, right? I don't know if Timmy Chandler was getting called in too much after this one, right? You start to Birnbaum, definitely not. So you started to figure out who could help you and who could not in high pressure situations. And that's what these tournaments tell you a lot about, as well as establishing the identity that you're talking about, Heath.